Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires, as well as what we know currently from various sources of information, some more credible than others, about what Creative Assembly is going to do going forward. I've already done a video on this, but this is further confirmation of things that I talked before, as well as certain things that, well, just didn't know before. Though, if I had checked way back months ago, I would not have necessarily been surprised by some of the things that I'm going to talk about here. We have Total War Center and its leaks. We have content creators like Great Book of Grudges. We have Legend of Total War, who both Great Book and Legend do have connections in Creative Assembly. They do get people talking with them, giving them information. And then there's other sources of information like leaked things, data files in the game, models in the game. So here is the clearest possible picture as to what Creative Assembly is going to do for certain. But one of the things all sources of information do agree on, or a lot of them do agree on, is that this is subject to change. And what I want to mention here from the very beginning is I personally suspect, very strongly suspect, that one of the reasons you're getting so much leaked information, be it the Star Wars game, the 40k game, all that kind of stuff. The reason we're getting all of this is Creative Assembly is testing the waters to see how people are reacting to their current plans. So here's what we know for certain and my thoughts on it. The next DLC is going to be the Monkey King, the Fire Dragon, Lindau, and it's also going to include Maneater, who I'm just going to call Manny because I think YouTube hates that name. Now, if you look at maps of Cathay, and you look at where the Monkey King is, and you look at where the Fire Dragon is, it is a bit surprising that you have Gelt over here against in the Broken Lands of Tianli, but it's likely where the Monkey King and the Fire Dragon could be is in this particular border region in Cathay. Now, for people who are expecting Ind Koresh, there's nothing on that. That's just like people pushing for that. I don't think Creative Assembly was ever interested in that. And even if they were, Games Workshop would never do it. It's one thing for them to do Cathay. There was actually more lore information about Cathay, and there's a reason why they do Cathay. But, yeah, Indo Koresh, I would be very surprised. Same with Nippon, right? Like, you gotta understand, like, there was a lot of information that was lacking on Cathay. There's even far less information on Nippon, on Ind and Koresh. I mean, we do have some stuff. So if you're gonna get Monkey King and Fire Dragon, they're going to be in this area. Although, you gotta wonder, and I have no idea on this, just speculation on my part, I do have to wonder if by placing Gelt in this area, they might set up a situation where the Fire Dragon gets moved to another location. Though if you look at these structures, like I imagine a settlement would fit right in very nicely there. And also, quite notably, like you see these mountains over here, like they just look like something that CA would, potentially change, just make playable. It would not be great dealing with mountains as Cathay, I gotta tell you, not having the Underway. And it would be two Cathay factions. Like the Monkey King is basically a variant of Cathay, though he's worshipping Tzeentch, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting. And I think like people assume correctly in saying that Maneater or Manny, he's basically gonna be hired by Fire Dragon to deal with the Monkey King. So they could make a campaign situation where like they expand the area here in the mountains and expand the area here, and you have a campaign happening here, or they could place the Legendary Lords all over the place. So that's the next DLC. 2 paid DLC Lords and a free one. So Fire Dragon is going to be free. Monkey King and Maneater are going to be paid. Whether or not the Ogres and Cathay get reworked, especially Cathay, that's an open discussion. I do think Cathay needs something of a soft rework, and Ogres need a major freaking rework. Now, the next DLC that's going to come out, and this is something people have kind of discovered many months ago, actually, is the next DLC is going to be Dogs of War. Now, what does Dogs of War mean, for those that are unaware? Dogs of War, what people take that, is Border Princes, Tylea, and potentially Estalia. And, or potentially just mercenary groups. That's what Dogs of War are. They're mercenary groups. And People speculate on how many lords we would get with that. Could be 2, could be free, could be 2 paid, 1 free. We don't know. Could be 3 paid and 1 free. Again, no idea on that. Though it's kind of worth pointing out, they're going to do free lords. There's 96 lords in the game right now. So before Dogs of War come out, and after the Cafean DLC comes out later this year, probably going to be September. Because, like, if you look at Forge of Chaos Dwarves and how long it took them to release Shadows of Change, could be late August, could be September, mid-late September. Though I'm not sure if CA, it would be wise for Creative Assembly to release it, like, late September, because there's a lot of games that are going to come out and going to cut into their sales. So that could be a problem for them. They did get screwed over, of course, with SOC because Baldur's Gate 3 came out at the same time. It just really showed the contrast between what CA was doing and what Larian was doing. I don't think that would be a situation that would happen this year. However, it's worth pointing out Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, which came out before SOC, like you're talking April, and you're talking an April DLC there, whereas Fronts Decay is more like May DLC. So could be delayed by a month. We'll see what CA does on that. But before Dogs of War comes out, or maybe at the same time, we're going to get the 100th Legendary Lord. It's not going to be Nagash. That's for certain, because Nagash is going to be the final DLC. So we're going to get Dogs of War before anything else. So it's not going to be Nagash. And there's a couple of options. I've already discussed those. I think if they want to do a free character, and there's some hints as to this, it likely would be Joseph Bookman, and he would be in Carcassonne as a free lord, released at the same time as you would likely get Dogs of War, or shortly before that, or maybe after the Ogre Cafe stuff. If they want to go with Joseph Bookman. If they want to do a paid DLC for the 100th character, I can easily imagine Tankwell. Where exactly Tankwell would be in, that's a tricky one to talk about. There's certainly plenty of areas you could put Skaven Legendary Lord in, all over the place. I think Tankwell would be best served kind of like the Empire, because he does have a lot of schemes and plots. I mean, the Empire can fit another Legendary Lord, would certainly complicate things for the Empire, but honestly, the Empire is so much stronger now that it wouldn't be an issue. So I think it depends on if CA wants to do something free, if they want to do something paid. We don't know that. There's no information on that. There's no information on the 100th Legendary Lord. We just know it's not going to be Nagash. Why do we know it's not going to be Nagash? Well, that ties into the final point, the final leaked information that we do have. From what people like Legend and other sources have indicated, Total War Center as well, the last DLC is going to be Nagash. Now, if you're and Neferata, if you believe Total War Center, but certainly Nagash. And it may be the final DLC. So wait, am I saying that Creative Assembly would only release free DLCs total going forward for Warhammer 3? Yes. It would not necessarily be as surprising. I'm not trying to doomsay or anything like that. Here's the thing. Warhammer 2 had 9 DLCs. Warhammer 3, with all the stuff, Warhammer 3 has already had 4, so you get Champions of Chaos. Don't forget that it was a paid DLC. I'm not counting Ogres here. So you get Champions of Chaos, you get Forge of Chaos Dwarves, you get Shadows of Change, you get Thrones of Decay. You add 3 more, you get to 7. 7 DLCs, considering all the issues Warhammer 3 has had, would not be surprising if that's what they went with. I know people would like more. I personally would like more. Don't get me wrong on that. But I think Creative Assembly is also probably wondering, okay, how much do we want to drag this on? Because it might just be from their perspective, and likely, based on various sources of information. People are saying Warhammer 3 was not profitable. You might wonder how the hell that is, but you gotta understand, Realms of Chaos was a disaster, and that disaster completely derailed their post-launch cycle. I am absolutely certain Creative Assembly wanted to release at least 2 DLC before they did Immortal Empires. You might be surprised, a lot of people are like, they should do Immortal Empires at launch. That's not how CA was planning this. They likely wanted to do Champions of Chaos and Forges of Chaos Dwarves in Realms of Chaos, and then release Immortal Empires, at least, maybe even Shadows of Change. They do have plans going straight back years, but those plans were completely derailed. They still released Forge of Chaos Dwarves, and they still released Champions of Chaos, but it was a very different affair, and you can imagine Creative Assembly, they didn't lose money on Warhammer 3, but they certainly didn't get as much money as they wanted. And until Shadows of Change came out. Shadows of Change was a complete freaking disaster show. So CA is really asking themselves right now, based on multiple sources, they haven't reached a definitive conclusion, it seems like. So they're trying to figure out what they go from here. But apparently, at least what I imagine, is that certainly before the debacle of SOC, Hyenas, and Pharaoh, Creative Assembly was certainly going to do that. Like, they were going to release Thrones of Decay. It wouldn't have had the major reworks. I imagine, like, we wouldn't have got the Gelt rework, the France rework, but it probably would have had the campaigns. It would have been a complete shit show. So thankfully, as sad as it is, I'm grateful we got to SOC the way we did, because I think, like, and I've said this before, if they had released Thrones of Decay in that state, I'm not sure Creative Assembly would have survived as a company. Because understand this, regardless of how people feel about Shadows of Change, the amount of anger from the vast portion of the community, many of which like the Empire, many of which like the Dwarves, would have been biblical, suffice to say, if they hadn't reworked the races. I've said this before, I'll say it again. So I'm certainly thinking that before December last year, that was the plan. Pretty certain, based on things I've read, leaks, information. It's not new information to believe that Creative Assembly was going to try and get out of Warhammer 3. Like, you know, you can pretty much tell from Robert Ptolemy's letter, and as well as other leaks, like people with relations in Creative Assembly, they've been saying these kind of things for a long time, like almost a year, if not over a year at this point, even before SOC came out. So that was probably the original plan. That plan completely thrown down the trash because Shadows of Change was a disaster. Hyenas was one of the biggest disasters in 40 years in gaming history, and Pharaoh was a disaster. So plans do change. Don't take this as a definitive. So, it's likely this is what they wanted to do. That may change. So only 3 DLCs, and, you know, you leave Lizardmen on the table, you leave Bretonia on the table, and we might not have even gotten reworks for Tomb Kings and Vampire Counts. I would be certain at this point that we are going to get reworks for at least Vampire Counts and Tomb Kings. Like, Nagash is a Tomb King. Like, he's not a Vampire Count. I mean, he's kind of like both factions, right? What kind of impact that would have for, like, Manfred, Volkmar, and anyone that's dealing with the books of Nagash, like the entirety of the race of the Tomb Kings, that is a big question. I think, like, they really need to rework that system of books of Nagash, make it more interesting. They probably do it for Nagash. Like, I imagine Nagash's campaign would be about getting his books, coming back to power, getting the Black Pyramid, and then becoming a god. Like, some people would say, well, Nagash is too powerful to be a legendary lord. He's not. Like, he would be too powerful if he succeeded in his plans, absolutely. But I imagine a lot of his campaign would be gaining that power. It's not like having a Dragon Emperor as a legendary lord. And same with Vultan, by the way. Like, that would also be Vultan's campaign if they ever add Vultan, a.k.a. Sigmar, who doesn't know who he is when he shows up as Vultan in both Storm and Chaos and End Times. So, with all of that being said, Nagash is the final DLC, and from what various sources say, they're not just going to do a DLC, they're going to do an expansion. Wouldn't make sense, because we've seen that Creative Assembly still cares about the Realms of Chaos map. I think they shouldn't, but they did still put some effort. Maybe minimal, but they did still put some level of effort in ROC. Like, you look at Thrones of Decay, yeah, there's stuff. Like, Elspeth has an entire endgame crisis that she spawns when she's playing her campaign in Realms of Chaos. Pretty sure she doesn't have that in Immortal Empires. Could be wrong on that. Actually, absolutely certain. So there's still unique content in ROC that isn't there in Immortal Empires. Less and less, certainly. But it would not surprise me. And I think, like, if they made a smaller map focused on Nehekara, all the way to Sylvania at the very least, focused on Nagash's journey to come back, and of course have Tomb Kings and other factions, that could be a great experience, really. And if they had a bunch of playable lords from other races that in a campaign it would be focused on stopping Nagash, you can also talk about Archeon, Middenheim, all that. So lots of possibilities over there for them to do so. What else could they do? Well, plenty. Lizardmen, High Elves, Dark Elves campaign. Though, I'll be honest with you guys, like, High Elves, yes, I could see that. Like, they had a plan for a Slaaneshi campaign. If they were going to add Slaanesh, they were likely going to add High Elves. There is Katik, like you can add a Legendary Lord for Katik over here, or maybe some uniqueness over here in a campaign, or another Legendary Lord for the High Elves who's far from home. So you could add that, add another Sinnelleos Lord. So that would be a possibility. I would also be surprised if they don't release at least one DLC for Khorne. So those would be other possibilities, like Sinnelleos, Khorne, High Elves. That would work. Maybe all free in a DLC. It would be nice to get Valten. It would be nice to get that. So like there's at least half a dozen. Or let's say, I would personally say there's at least 3-4 DLCs beyond what they've already planned that they could go with. And that does mean things like Dark Elves and Lizardmen would not necessarily get any improvements, or Beastmen. But like Dark Elves work as a race, it's just like they're Legendary Lords. Lizardmen do desperately need to be better. But the problem with Lizardmen is that, regardless of what people think, like CA is at the point right now. You gotta understand why they're doing the things they're doing, like Tankwall, Nagash, Dogs of War, Cafe, all that is from their perspective going to sell well. You might ask, well, why would Cafe sell well? Because Cafe is very popular in China. That's why. That's why you're getting Cafe. Lizardmen, unless they're attached to another DLC that's gonna have a race or lord that's gonna sell well, probably not. Maybe maybe they'll do something with at the same time as Tankwall. Maybe a free character for Lizardmen and take the opportunity to rework the race. We don't know, right? Like Mazmundi absolutely needs a Legendary Lord rework. So does Teclis. Like those two characters, above all others, need a desperate rework. They're pathetic. Like Gelt is just reigning supreme over there. So those would be options. But I would say, like based on what I've heard and what I would personally believe on this, I would say it really depends on how things go forward. I'm a bit concerned about the Cafe and DLC because it's going to come down to this. Here's my perspective on this. How is the Cafe DLC going to do? Well, if you're asking $25 for 2 Legendary Lords, that's not going to go well. Like if they lower the price, yes. If they keep the price and ask us to pay for 2 Legendary Lords, yeah, that's not going to sit well with people at all. So that's like that's the conundrum for them, for Creative Assembly. Because it's like it would be crazy to think, but maybe this was their plan all along. Let's increase the price, which has a change in Forge the Cast Dwarves, and then we'll just do 2 Legendary Lords as opposed to 3 with the Ogre DLC or Dragon Ball Z or whatever, and that's the same price. Don't do that, CA, please. I mean, I'm asking you because I'm a content creator and I like to see your game do well. Playing people are not happy about the price as is. You increase it or you give us less value for that price, that's gonna blow up in your face. Like quite literally. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Creative Assembly has done well with Thrones Decay, but if you think it's enough to redeem themselves, no. That's a start. And it's going to take many years. And I personally believe, and I would say this to the people in charge of CA, to the people in charge of Sega, at this point in time, you fucked up. You fucked up royally. You fucked up to a degree only Atari did worse. You don't just, we'll just do another game and that will sell well. Look, a 40k game can sell well, but if you think a 40k game is going to guarantee success, there's graveyards of 40k games that were a dumpster fire. So don't underestimate it. There's graveyards of Star Wars games that were a dumpster fire. So just because you have the IP for 40k and Star Wars does not mean that will do well. They do seem to have canceled the World War I game. Like many people, various things are coming out on that, like Total Center, Legend, all that. Various things coming out on that, like, yeah, that apparently didn't go so well. Didn't do well in playtesting. I can't imagine why. And that makes me wonder if they were trying to pass off the gameplay of World War I in a similar way to how battles work right now in Total War. That would be a terrible idea. It would not work. And World War I is a tricky thing, right? Just because of the nature of the war itself. As gamers, we want to go out there and do something, whereas World War I did have assaults, but it had assaults that didn't achieve much, right? Like, you would have a battle lasting for months and barely any ground would be changed. So they gotta figure out a way to make that interesting. Petroglyph tried to do a World War I game, it crashed and burned. Just the reality of that. So I would say Creative Assembly, regardless of that, I would say for Creative Assembly at this point, they need to understand that investing right now in Warhammer 3 is not just about the money they're going to make in Warhammer 3, it's about the money they're going to make from a future game. Because you can bet your ass, if they don't handle this well, they will not have the cushion they did when Warhammer 3 launched. Because Warhammer 3 sold a lot of copies at launch. That will not happen again if they release a bunch of DLC that piss people the fuck off. If they increase the price, if they don't deliver on content, if they don't deliver on quality, it's not necessarily how many DLCs, like, free would be fine, but the quality of those DLCs and the price need to be good. They need to be a good deal, they need to be exciting, they need to get people interested. That's my perspective. Let me know what you guys think about all of this. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more, and, hopefully things will go well. Really. But we shall see.